What's up, boys? Tricks Ridiculous back with another video, and in this video we've got some exciting news coming to us about Marvel's Avengers. The official Avengers page did put out that there are some patch notes. Those are already live in the game, but the big thing that I think a lot of people didn't see as part of this is actually the reply that they made to this. And this is what I'm going to be talking about today. So they're basically gathering the details behind challenge rating updates, and we'll provide them, when they have them. This is huge. Now, what I'm going to get to in this video is actually just kind of talking through some things that will actually prepare you for the new challenge difficulties. If you're a new player and you don't know really what I'm talking about, back when the game first came out, in like the way vanilla, when the game started, there were 4 challenge ratings. It was challenge 1, 2, 3, and 4, and there still are. But right now they don't do anything. They've been disabled. They don't, even if you do challenge 4, you don't get anything. The difficulty doesn't go past the cap. But basically, back in the day, you could go up to challenge 4, and the difficulty at the highest level would be 15 power higher than the max. So if you were doing like max level content like Tachyon Riffs, and you were doing them on challenge 4, it would go up to 165. So even if you had a 150 character, it would still be 15 power higher than your current character. Now, if you're relatively new to the game, you would have no idea about that. But for us, for veteran players, playing on that difficulty, it was extremely, extremely difficult. Okay, and some of the problems with the difficulty before is it didn't really give anything else, right? It didn't give you any loot, any better loot, and it really didn't, really wasn't worth playing. Kind of just slowed you down. You got some extra materials for doing it, but that was pretty much it. So in this video, really what I want to talk to you about is how to prepare for challenge 4. Right now we're seeing a lot of glass cannon builds. You're seeing a lot of like Hulks that can just do millions of damage, and just everyone just specking into pure damage, and that's fine because that is what works right now. That is the meta that we're in. But a lot of people, I think, I've been a big proponent of building more defensive characters, so I think that that's really going to be important when Challenge 4 comes back. I think if you're focused solely on offense, like what works now, you're going to be in a world of hurt when Challenge 4 comes back. So that's what we're going to get into today. So I'll go through kind of each character, some of the different perks that I think you should be looking out for. You probably don't need to equip them right now, like I said, until the changes are made, but just some pieces that you should be mindful of, actually picking up, so that when the time does come, you can kind of quickly switch to a tankier character and hopefully give yourself a better chance in these more challenging activities. So before we get into it, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to this video. It all helps out the channel, and I do greatly appreciate it. We're so close to 1,000 subs, so do your boy a solid and hit that subscribe button. But without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, boys, so here we are in game. So this is really a topic that I do kind of preach a lot on stream. If you've been, watching the streams, I'm constantly chanting for defense. I'm a big believer in having solid defense on your characters. Obviously, like I said, it's not something that gets too much respect right now, just because the game doesn't go past Challenge 2. So, there's really not too much of a need for it right this second. You can get away with very completely offensive builds. But like I said, when Challenge 4 comes back, and people are going to be getting one shot, unless they have very high defense, this is where I think it'll be a little valuable. And really, I think a lot of veteran players who remember Challenge 4, they'll understand the importance of this, but maybe they're not thinking of it right now. And for new players, it's going to be a totally different world for you when you do get into Challenge 4 for the first time. But what I really want to get into today is just kind of stat allocations, different perks that you'd want to be looking out for defense, and it does kind of vary by character to some extent, and hopefully just kind of show you kind of what you want to be shooting for best in slot and for some of your stats as well. Now, I will say right off the bat that I don't think this game is going to operate having characters that are pure tanks. I know you might have seen some builds lately that are just like pure tanks, just taking as much damage as they can. They're very cool builds, and I do love the idea of that. I just don't know how valuable it will actually be in a team environment. For example, if you look at something like a Hulk or a Captain America, they're really the only two characters that can, consistently taunt other enemies. But really, their taunts aren't going to be able to hit every single enemy on the battlefield, right? There's always going to be snipers in the perch. There's always going to be, stiletto bots that do like auto targeting on you, or adaptoids kind of floating in the air, or whatever the case may be. And the taunts that they do don't really last that long either. So the point is, I don't think that it's really going to be worth it. I mean, admittedly, it does remain to be seen. We don't have the cloning labs yet or the Omega level threat missions. So I could be completely wrong, but I don't think that having like one character on your team that is responsible for tanking and taunting, and then having every other character on the team be, your DPS or whatever the case may be, I don't think that sort of setup is going to work in this game. We know that bosses cannot be taunted, at least not the ones that are currently in the game, and the only characters that can taunt, they don't really taunt at a really respectable distance, or for a respectable duration. So single character tanks kind of carrying the tankiness for the team, probably not something we're going to see, but I do believe in individual tankiness per character. Okay, so right now we're looking at my Captain America. Now this Captain America is built on the beefier side. I do prefer to play him that way so that I'm able to kind of hit those sweet spots for takedowns more consistently and not just instant kill every enemy. But you'll see here, obviously from a stat perspective, the two defensive stats that matter are resolve and resilience. What you really want to be shooting for is a little bit of resilience and as much resolve as you want, okay? So when I say a little bit of resilience, I would definitely recommend at least, 25 to maybe 40 resilience. But probably no more than maybe like 100 at the max end. The reason I say that is because resilience in this game actually has a steep diminishing return, okay? So if you stack like, hundreds and hundreds of points into resilience, you're not going to be doing yourself a service. You're going to actually be kind of really tanking your character, because the amount of armor you get between 0 resilience and say 30 resilience is more than you would actually get from the difference, between 200 resilience and 300 resilience. It takes a tremendous amount of resilience to get even the smallest returns after a certain point, and then I do believe it actually caps at a certain point. So you definitely want just a little bit of resilience. Like I said, probably about 50 or so. Definitely no more than 100, but not 0. Having 0 is not something I would recommend, because even just having a very small amount in it, like up to 50 or 100, actually does give you a pretty good bang for your buck. You do get quite a bit of armor, which is very useful, but no more than that. Any more than 100, and you're going to be actually hurting yourself when those stats could be better used somewhere else. So then, of course, that leaves us with resolve, right? Resolve affects your maximum willpower and your willpower recovery effectiveness. This one scales linearly, so there's no limit. There's no hard cap, and there's no diminishing returns. Whatever you put in here, you're just going to get more willpower and more recovery effectiveness. It can go up as much as you want. So depending on how tanky you want your character, this is really where you would funnel any other defensive points, is just focusing on resolve, okay? For any character, even if you're not looking for them to be an extreme tank, I would probably recommend at least 100 resolve. I would definitely not go lower than 100 resolve for Challenge 4, because I do believe you will be very susceptible to one-shots. I think snipers, stiletto bots, adaptoids, things that like are tough to avoid, they're going to be hitting you and they're going to be instantly killing you. So you definitely want at least 100 resolve, maybe even a little more, to be able to survive in those Challenge 4 encounters. So looking at the actual perks that you would want, so really, to me, it really comes down to getting a defensive buff. Okay, now we all know damage buff, right? Damage buff is an extremely powerful buff. Everyone tries to get it on every one of their characters. It gives something like a 35% crit chance and a 60% damage boost. It is extremely, extremely powerful. But what I don't think a lot of people really take advantage of is defense buff. Now, defense buff basically works the same way as damage buff. It can trigger from all the different ways that damage buff can trigger, but it basically gives you a time frame where you're taking about half damage. I don't know the exact figure. I think I heard someone say it was about 60, which would make sense, unconfirmed. But in my testing, it looks like you take about half damage when you're affected by it. So if you can get, a consistent way of actually getting this buff, and that really does depend on your character. And like I said, I'll go through a few different characters in this one and just kind of show you or tell you what some of the easier ways to get them on different characters are. But really, being able to consistently get a defense buff like a damage buff is going to be a tremendous value for your character actually, trying to stay alive. So in my case, I've got right here on my chest piece, reactive buff, taking damage grants a damage buff. Very, very good perk, right? Very easy to activate. You don't really have to think about it. I strongly recommend reactive buff on pretty much every character, but as far as what you'd want the buff for, I would switch it around depending on the character. So for someone like Cap, Hulk, Thor, and probably Iron Man, I would go with taking damage grants a damage buff. Those are very easy ways to get damage buffs on those characters because they are a little tankier. For Black Widow, I would even take that damage buff on Kamala as well because she can be a little tanky as well. But for someone like a Black Widow or a Kate Bishop, I would recommend taking damage can grant a defense buff. I would look for that. That way, anytime you take damage, you're going to get that defense buff, decent chance to do it anyway. And then you're instantly going to be taking half damage. Very reliable way to get it. Okay. Now, the other perks that you might want to get on your chest piece, a lot of people really just use chest pieces for stat sticks, but some of the other perks you could want as well. Courageous Inspiration is very, very good, and it's very underrated. Grants a willpower burst when critically injured. Now, sometimes this perk, there are random modifiers that no one ever even really thinks about in missions, but there are some modifiers that turn this off, unfortunately. But for when it doesn't get turned off, it's an extremely powerful perk to have. Basically, when you get injured, you just get your health back. So when you go to kind of critical health, you get your health right back. And then I think it's on something like a 10 or 15 second cooldown. Very, very good. Strongly recommend looking out for that perk. And then for the third piece, in a perfect world, the third kind of piece you would like to get is called basically armored in proximity to other teammates. Let me see what the actual name of it is. Here, the proximity armor. Okay, so armored in proximity to other teammates. That's very, very good as well. It's very passive, right? So it's very easy to just kind of get going and not even have to think about it. Having that, in kind of your third slot there on your chest piece can be very, very nice to have as well. The only other thing, if you, just as a caveat to all of this, Jarvis Barrier, of course, is an extremely powerful defensive, perk as well. They're a little harder to get. You can get them from the 14th floor hives, or you can also, get them from various other sources randomly on some named gear. But for the most part, the 14th floor hive seems like the most consistent way to get them right now. I've seen pieces, that trigger Jarvis Barrier all different ways. Reactive buff would be a great way to get that as well. I have a piece on my Black Widow that taking damage has a chance to activate Jarvis Barrier. It's absolutely fantastic. Anytime she takes damage, there's a really good chance that she gets that Jarvis barrier, gives her a 20% of her health overshield, and it lasts for 60 seconds. It's absolutely phenomenal. But those pieces are a little bit of kind of unicorn pieces. They don't come up too much. But if you do get something like that, it can be really good as well. For Cap specifically, and for all different characters, there's different ways that you can get these buffs. For me, like I said, because I have taking damage grants a damage buff, I have that on my Cap, my Thor, my Hulk, and my Iron Man. You're going to want a defense buff as well. So there's a couple of different ways you can get them. You can try to get it on maybe your range piece, when hitting with a range crit, or maybe when hitting with a melee crit if you melee a lot with your character. But an easy way to get it on certain characters would be through the heroic gear. Okay, so for Cap, I use critical protection there. So it's that middle perk right there. Basically a 40% chance that a takedown will grant a defensive buff. Now, chance to get something on takedown is not a perk I would recommend on every character, but as you know, with Captain America, he's doing takedowns left and right? So I assume if you're playing a Brooklyn Brawler build, you're going to be performing takedowns left and right. You're definitely going to get that defensive buff. The other way that I have here would just be defeating 3 enemies. I just happen to also get that for another way to trigger it. That can happen very easily as well with Cap. You use his steamroller on, a bunch of flying drones. It'll take down the whole crowd, and you'll get that defensive buff that way. For characters like Thor, for example, you could very easily use something like, defeat 3 enemies or 16 rapid hits. That happens very easily with either of those happen easily with his God Blast. Same thing with Iron Man, 16 rapid hits, 3 enemies. Black Widow can also use chance on takedown, right? Because when she's invisible, she can do takedowns pretty easily. Or the 16 rapid hits if you're using pistols and you are playing a range build. That's another way to get it. But again, there's really a lot of different ways. Do what works for you, but I strongly recommend defense buff. Really, on all of your characters. I strive on all of my characters to be able to get a damage buff and defense buff up pretty much at all times. If you have a build where you can consistently keep both of those buffs up, you really don't have to worry about much else as far as your stats, your other perks. None of it really matters. If you can just keep damage buff, defense buff, and you're somewhat spec'd towards the way you want to play, you'll be absolutely fine. So definitely try to, play around with it, see exactly what is consistent for your character. And then really the only other thing would be your ISOs, right? So the orange ISOs are the ones that grant triple resolve or double resolve, but it'll still be, the same kind of total resolve. And then the black ones grant the resilience. So you can kind of play around with this to see where you think it'll land. Don't worry too much about the actual defense rating up at the top. That's more of like an overview. It's not super reliable. If you feel like having just a little bit more resilience is better than just a little more resolve on your character, then by all means go with that. If you don't want to use resilience or resolve here and you just want to go maybe double might for damage and you have plenty of resolve and resilience elsewhere, then by all means go for that as well. But again, play around with it. Try to look out for gear that has, easy ways to get defensive buff, easy ways to maybe get Jarvis barrier, and then some of these other perks like willpower burst when injured, and armored in proximity to other teammates. I promise you they're all very good. The other one would be invulnerability buff, which can also happen, on all different things. That would be a little better on someone that hits pretty regularly. So you may have seen my video on the Invincible Kate Bishop, where you can just get invulnerability buff on ranged crit. She shoots 5 arrows at a time, so it's very easy for her to proc that ranged crit. You could also do something like that with Thor, where you have maybe something like this, where chance when hitting enemy with a melee crit to activate Jarvis barrier. on someone like maybe Thor or Black Widow, if you pair that with like Black Widow's invisibility for auto crits, or just anything like that, any way to get easy crits, that being able to kind of pull up Jarvis Barrier consistently would be really, really nice defensive piece to have as well. So again, just some things to think about when you're playing and kind of prepping for some of the new content that's going to come out and the new challenge mode. I'm really excited to see what exactly the new challenge mode has in store for us. I'm hoping that it'll actually affect our gear drops, and will actually be incentivized to play on Challenge 4. I love playing on Challenge 4, but like I said, if you're building your characters right now for pure damage, glass cannon, I promise you that when Challenge 4 comes out, all those bosses that you used to be able to one-shot, all those enemies, those rooms you used to be able to clear in 1 second, you're not going to be able to clear everything in one shot, and the enemies will be one-shotting you. So the tables will be turned on you very quickly. So anyway, just some things to think about. Let me know kind of what pieces you have that you use from a defensive perspective that you feel are, really nice and really smooth on your character, and on what character. I'd be interested to hear. But that's pretty much it for me. Hopefully we get that Challenge 4 piece pretty soon. Good luck to everybody when it does come out. I'll definitely be playing with people as well. But that's all I had in this video. Be sure, again, to like, comment, subscribe. It all helps out the channel. And check me out on Twitch as well. The link is in the description. That's it from me, guys. I'll see you in the next one.